So I was just sitting there minding my own business. Then all of a sudden, ... That's how change happens. That's how transformation happens. Things are going along one way, and then all of a sudden, something happens, something changes. Um, for as long as almost all of us can remember, there's been a Queen of England, and it's been the same one. And then all of a sudden, there's a King of England. It's like, well, we've heard of that happening before, but I don't have any experience with that. So that's a little different. And that may or may not have any particular impact or influence on your life, other than there's a thing to be observing from a distance. Had the opportunity to do a wedding yesterday. I was out in Chester County. It was beautiful, beautiful on this farm. And Aaron and Jim have known each other for 16 years. They're high school sweethearts. It's just a wonderful story. And they've been together, and they've known that they're in love with each other for most of that 16 years. And then all of a sudden, they're married. And things are different. And in a lot of ways, things are the same. But in other ways, things are different. And we're going to talk about how that change, how that transformation that changes the world happens for us. I was remembering back in the good old days when I was working in the printing industry. We had big every 5 years trade show, and I was at the one. I was at Print '01, and I was traveling on business a lot at that time. And I came home before the show ended. It's like the week and a half long trade show, so I came home early. I came home on a Monday. And I remember on the flight home, I got upgraded to first class, and we're getting ready to land, and I take my laptop, which I'd been working with, and I go to stow it. And the guy sitting in the seat next to me gives me a hard time. He says, you just put it to sleep. You need to turn that all the way off. You need to shut that computer all the way down. I said, no, I don't. He says, it's for safety purposes. You're not allowed to leave your computer on. It'll interfere with the avionics. And we had this discussion, and so I think I wound up humoring him and shutting the computer down because it just didn't make that much of a difference to me. And this was back in the days where I had this little pocket knife that I carried on my keychain, sharp little blade, snapped out, and got to have it. And it was in my carry-on bag, which is where I kept my keys. And so I put my laptop back into the same bag where the little knife was, and flew home and thought nothing of it. And then the world changed, because that flight home was on September 10th, 2001. And the next day, bringing a knife on an airplane became very unpopular. And, and it turns out that people could make cell phone calls from an airplane, and that wasn't what was going to bring the airplane down. And the world changed, because we went from being a world where jet airliners didn't fly into buildings to a world where that happened. It's hard to remember now what it was like to go to the airport and not have to go through security screening when there was no such thing as the TSA. And the world changes. So you look at that from one perspective and you say, well, life is precarious. And because we never know what's going to happen that's going to change the world next. But you can look at that same exact process and say, life is full of possibilities. Something that's never happened before can happen now. And that's what our spiritual practice is about. It's what practical prayer is all about. It's looking at the circumstance and the situation that we're in now and saying, what do I want to have instead? What would I prefer to have instead? And as we let go of the belief that everything that has been needs to stay, it needs to keep going the way that it's been going, as we let go of that, we get to open up to something new. And that infinite creative power that Deepak was talking about gets to create it. That evolution, that unfolding can include this newness that we're looking for. It can happen in a job. I mean, that's the way a job search is described in What Color Is Your Parachute? Described in one sentence. No, 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 yes. And that yes is where the transformation is, because we get to go from not having a job, or not having a job that we're satisfied with, to having a job. Same thing with a relationship. How long is it going to take you to find that person to have a meaningful, committed, loving relationship with? Well, if you said probably 15 years, you're probably right. And if you say it can happen instantaneously, you're also right. Because it's not the universe out there that's controlling the experience that we're having. It's when we open to it, when we allow that new experience to come along, that it can happen. Same thing applies in everything. It applies in our health and our physical comfort. You know, if there's that twinge in my shoulder, how long is it going to take for that to go away? Or in my case, my left hip. I'm perfectly ready to have that go away. And there seems to be a little bit of activity that's still possible. And then all of a sudden, everything changes. The world changes, and it can change instantaneously. When the phone rings, when a text message comes in, when the car in the other lane swerves. We had the experience a couple of years ago where Dina was babysitting for our grand dog, and she inadvertently tripped over the dog, and she went from having a pleasant Saturday afternoon to a spiral fracture in her arm, including surgery and all sorts of stuff. All of a sudden, the world changes. Whether it's the big world or our experience of the world, it changes. Here's a term that will remind you that the change can happen instantaneously, because it's actually right there in the term. Flash flood. Okay? We go from a drought to a flash flood. It happened last week. That can happen. It's a flash. That's why they call it a flash flood. It doesn't take any time for that to unfold. It just happens, and then things continue on. They might be tremendously different. They might be very similar. It was about a year ago that that hurricane Ida went through, and we wound up with the Vine Expressway turned into a canal that would rival the ones in Venice. It didn't last, more than a couple of days. It was not an impressive canal, but that was something to see. People surfing on Main Street. I mean, that was a thing. And that's not the sort of thing that people would be envisioning or inviting or thinking about necessarily. But then all of a sudden, something happens. So what does all that mean? As I go through all of these different stories and all of these different examples, it means that we are always at choice. We always have the opportunity to be grateful for what we have, for the way things have been going, to settle into that feeling of thankfulness for the wonderful way that these aspects and elements of my life are unfolding. And at the same time, we have the opportunity to look at what we don't like and choose something different, to invite something different into our world. And that's how we, on a personal level, change the world. So the question is for you. What's the change that you're inviting? What's the change that you want to see in the world? Because you get to be the change that you want to see. The first place that it happens is in you, in your consciousness, in your mind, in your heart. So there's no limit here. A flash flood of love. It's possible for us. Whatever it is that we're opening ourselves up to, that infinite creative power that has created everything always has the same answer. It always says yes. And it's ready to say yes again for each of us and for all of us. So choose well. Set your intention. Let go of your disbelief in what hasn't been working and open something new and wonderful, because you deserve it. You are wonderful. And so it is.